Hey, we got another great opportunity to talk with Larry Wallace today, and he gave us a wonderful interview previously, answered our questions, but Larry's got a great sense of humor, and I think that's carried him a long way through difficult situations, and he's got some stories he wants to share with us. And so we're really looking forward to that, Larry. So please tell the first humorous story that you brought with you today.
Well, now, let me correct you on that, because you asked me to do it, and I made sure that I didn't do anything or say anything here that statute of limitations is not.
Yes, sir.
So I've got 6 stories. I've culled them out of about 1,000, and I'll keep them short. And I'm involved in all of them, but I can say this, the youngest one's over 40 years old.
We can't wait. That surely surpasses the statute of limitations.
Yes,
we
sir.
can't wait, sir.
Well, I guess the first one, I'll try to hit 2 or 3 different things. The first one might be my first night on the police force in Athens. This is all involving my career. And I got hired, and when I went to work, my first job was shaking doors downtown. I went to work at 11 and got off at 7 the next morning. I walked all the back alleys and shook the doors to make sure that they were all locked and what have you. And we didn't have cell phones, of course. We didn't have walkie-talkies or anything back then. And my communication with the world was a cab stand on the side of the Strand Theater, Jolly Cab Stand, and then the spur station. And it was open 24 hours a day. So the first door I found unlocked that night was going upstairs over to the old Citizens National Bank, Dr. Ross Aarons's office, who, by the way, delivered me at Epperson Hospital on October 29th, 1944, 75 years ago plus. But the door to his office was open. So I go in, and it immediately smelled like antiseptic and alcohol, rubbing alcohol, and I quietly go up the steps, go past Minnie Owen's office, who was his nurse, and go back in there. And I'm real quiet. I've got a flashlight, and I had bought a gun from the assistant chief of police when I started my police career for $20. And I might add that I worked 3 years before the Tennessee Law Enforcement Academy was even built. So I had absolutely 0 training, period. For those years, it was OJT, on the job. So I'm going back into Dr. Aarons's office, and I see a form sitting in his office chair with his back to me. And I think this guy's got in here, and he's drunk, he's robbing the office, and he's passed out. So I tried to figure out how, I've only been working a few hours, how I'm going to handle this situation. So I have a pair of handcuffs, and I walk up behind him, and I slap a handcuff on his left wrist. He screams bloody murder and comes straight up, and when he did that, I got him in the floor, and what it wound up being, he was the janitor named Tommy. He was Dr. Aarons's janitor. He was scared to death. I was as scared as he was, and we had the best time there for about 30 minutes you've ever seen. But that was my maiden night in law enforcement. I'll never forget it.
In a small town, I'm not surprised. Wouldn't be surprised if Tommy didn't remind you of that on occasion.
As long as he
right?
lived, he did. You remember Tommy?
I do indeed, and I remember that office. So yeah.
You never heard that one?
No, sir, I didn't. I'd not heard it, but I'm glad I did this time. What else is on your?
Well, let's see. This occurred during my tour of the Athens Police Department. Many people might not remember that long before ambulances, funeral home hearses served as ambulances in this community and every community across the country. So when there was a wreck or an accident or whatever it be, you might have all 3 funeral homes directors sitting in a hearse all at one place. So one night there was a call came in down at the jail way in the night that there was a disturbance at a home out close to City Park School. And I won't name any names, but I won't name any positions, but it was a judge's home, which I didn't know at the time. And there was an elderly lady and a gentleman in a pair of pajamas right outside the door. And turns out that he had called Hearst to come and take him up to the American Legion to get him a cold drink. And he ran in the house. I wasn't able to get him, but it was well known in our community there. I'll never forget it because all those Hershey's congregating. It was just fun to watch.
And is one of those funeral home operators still in circulation, Larry?
There's only one living.
Yeah, that's good. We're going to talk to him later.
And he doesn't get around very well anymore.
No.
But he's still in circulation.
Well,
he's a dear friend.
I appreciate that story, and we've already told him we want to talk to him. So we may work that
Bring
story
it up
in.
later.
Oh yeah, we will.
It wasn't him that was there that night. It was another one.
But you had to learn to operate discreetly. I mean, within your authority and to do the right thing, but to not get too carried away when maybe somebody else in an official position didn't act with that kind of discretion.
Right. And I will say this: had I been able to get to him outside his home, I would have arrested him. But it was not to be. It was a misdemeanor, of course, and you can't go in someone's home on a misdemeanor. So, but anyway, he's fortunate that he didn't get arrested.
Well, I think so, and we're fortunate. I hope some people can take away some lessons from that story too, Larry. What's next?
All right, let's see what's next. The third one is whiskey still in Polk County. When I was a young trooper down there, back in the 60s, over 50 years ago, we had to wear long sleeve shirts in the summer, and we had to wear ties and long sleeve shirts, and we had no air conditioner in our cars. And it was a real hot July day, working on day shift, and I dreaded it so bad. It was so hot and muggy, and I pulled into the Polk County Jail to get a cup of coffee that morning, and I got a phone call from the federal ATF, and they were a citizen of Polk County who had just got out of federal prison, was a big-time whiskey maker. And over all close to Parksville Lake, he had a major still, they said, and they wanted me to go with them and help bust that still up. And so I obviously went with them, and so we went over there, and I couldn't go home and change clothes. Had to wear that hot uniform over there. I had a double-bitted axe they provided, and my job was to bust up the mash, big mash barrels. They were vats, we called them. We called it full of buttermilk. And there was dead rats swimming in it. It had been swimming in it. It was just nasty as it could be over there. And it worked all day long. It had 7 or 8 vats, and it was muggy, and the smell was atrocious. And I had that white whiskey mash all over me, that moonshine mash, all over me from head to toe. I looked like I'd been in New York City in 9/11, you know, my person. I thought, I've got to get home somehow at the end of the day. And I said, I can't stop anybody. There's no way I can stop anybody. And so I'm starting home. I'm south of Benton, trying to get up to Benton, where I lived. Here come a Mason-Dixon truck. There was a trucking company. I don't think it's in existence anymore, but he just absolutely ran 3 or 4 people off the road coming south, and I had to turn around and go get him. The road was full on US 411. I pulled over and I thought, this is going to be interesting, me walking up that truck looking like this. So I walk up to the truck and tell him to step outside where I can talk to him. He said, "You're drunk, trooper. I'm not getting down." I said, "Yes, you are." So I got up on the ramp, on the step, and we helped him down where we could talk. And so I said, "I'm not drunk. I've been working." He said, "You're drunk." He said, "This is going to be reported." I said, "Well, do what you have to do." So I thought, I better stop in at the jail and let them know that I'm out here, because no telling who they'll call. Well, what happened, he called his dispatcher, and they called the governor's office. They actually called the governor's office, said there was a drunk state trooper on US 411 stopping everybody. And so, of course, I wasn't drunk, and I had so they carried me high there at the Polk County Jail for about a month over that. It wasn't really funny at the time, but it was funny later. So that was quite an experience.
I'd like to see the picture of that. I really would have.
It was interesting.
Great. And then, of course, like you and Tommy, you probably stayed close to that truck driver, didn't you?
Oh, yeah.
Mason Dixon.
Mason Dixon.
What else? Great story. What else?
Well, the next one, the title of it's Myrtle Beach. This was over 40 years ago. It happened up in Scott County originally. There was a man, he was a state trooper, and he was going to be running for sheriff of that Scott County up there. And he went out one morning and started his pickup truck, and tragic story. A man bombed him. It bombed the truck, put dynamite under the truck, and it blew the truck sky high. Somehow the man lived. It blew both legs off, and it was just terrible. But he lived. And so we put a lot of emphasis on it. I was stationed in Nashville at the time, and right after I left the sheriff's office, went back to the bureau, and we were trying to get some ladies, because we had a dangerous person out there. And so about the middle of one day, we got a phone call, and I was working with the resident TBI agent that was assigned to Scott County, and then there was an assistant DA working the case, and a federal ATF agent was working, federal bomb and arson. And so we got a call that the man that we wanted to interview was in jail in Surfside Beach, South Carolina, which is just about 8 or 10 miles south of Myrtle Beach. So we struck out for Myrtle Beach, South Carolina on July the 3rd, the evening of July the 3rd, without a toothbrush, change of clothes, without anything. All four of us in that car. We were trying to get down there and get that case solved. So we rolled in down there right well after dark, and come to find out that the man had been released. He wasn't there anymore. And it was a long trip for nothing at that time. But we were hot on the trail. And then by that time it's after midnight, and we had to figure out where we were going to stay, because we couldn't drive back, and it's 4th of July by that time. There was no rooms within 20 miles in any direction. And so the police department there found us an old bungalow that was a block or so off the beach, and it was upstairs. It probably built in the 1920s. It didn't have an air conditioner. It had what looked like a good half-inch to an inch of sand on the floor. Two standard beds with really short legs, and that's all they had, mattress and box springs. And the room probably hadn't been cleaned in a while. But we had to pay $200 to stay there. And so we went to bed, and we all had our clothes on and everything, of course, and we was trying to decide who was going to sleep with who. And I was the biggest man in the room at the time, and the other TBI agent was the smallest man in the room. And I said, I want to keep it in the family. I want to sleep with Rick. And so the assistant DA and the ATF agent slept together. We laid down with our clothes on. Like, we might have took our shoes off. I don't know whether we did or not. And everybody was talking, joking around there a little bit. And finally, it got real quiet, and somebody said, "Good night, John boy." Everybody said good night. I waited about 5 minutes, and Rick and I were laying there, and I said, "Rick, if you'll turn over, I'll hug you back." He said, "Like the devil you will." And he grabbed a sheet off the bed and got down on the floor, and in that sand, which is exactly what I wanted. That bed was too little for one person. So I had the bed the rest of the night. We got back up, and I tell you, it was a right garden kind of a night. Those are things that you get into when you're hot on a case, when you're a detective.
Well, it's a great story, and I just wondered if you and Rick had stayed close since
then. Well, frankly, he's been retired a number of years, and he's well known throughout the bureau as the only agent that never slept with a director.
That's great. I'm sure that he's been proud of that for quite some time. Did you catch the gentleman, the man you were hunting?
Finally, later on we did. It was a tragic situation, but that was a very memorable case.
I can only imagine. That's a great story.
All right.
Hey, I know you got more. Tell us, please, Larry.
All right, the next one, I guess the fifth one out of six. I just picked six out because, like I said, the time limitations are gone. I call it the 1 mile run. Another agent, this was back many years ago, was with me, and we were working a major case up at Brushy Mountain Prison. And it was on a Friday night, and it was time we got out of the prison and got down there. It was way after midnight. We should have got a room and stayed in Knoxville, but we decided we were going to try to get home to Nashville. And we should have never made the trip. Both of us too sleepy to drive. And so we get down past Knoxville. He's driving, and he said, "I just can't go another mile." He said, "I just can't do it. I'm just about ready to pass out." And I said, "Well, pull over when you get a chance here, and get a wide place, and I'll get under the wheel." Well, this guy was a practical joker, and he was really hard on people he worked with. And I owed him one or two. And so I got under the wheel, and he was asleep almost before the door got shut. I sat there for a minute or two and watched him and looked at him, and I drove to the next mile marker. I drove 1 mile, and I pulled over. I sat there for a minute or two, and I found out, got him by the shoulder and shoved on him there, and I said, "Rick, I'm give out, you're going to have to drive." He said, "It seemed like I just went to sleep." I said, "My gosh, Rick, you're going to have to help me a little bit." So he gets out and staggers. Around, gets back under the wheel, and I go over on the right side. I'm acting like I was sleeping. He went this little piece, and he said, "Where are we?" I'm not going to tell you what he called me, but he called me a bad name. But he wound up driving the rest of the way. I know that seemed not like it's very funny, but it was hilarious.
Oh, no, I can. I'm just going to say, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because if I'm ever in a similar situation with you, I'm going to watch my back, pun intended. So please, and I know this story, I'm looking forward to it.
I guess this last one, this is Danny, is probably about as close as I ever come to losing my career. This is the sixth one. Like I said, I had 1,000 I could tell, but I didn't, for this short time frame, we'll just leave it with this. But in 1980, about 1980, 81, I think, dogfighting was a misdemeanor in the state of Tennessee. And the State Association of the Humane Society wanted to make it a felony. Of course, they asked the Bureau to help them. And we were trying to help them with legislation. And Humane Societies have always been a very passionate group of people who feel very strongly, and rightfully so. Sometimes in situations with the legislature and other governing bodies, they're not received very well. And wanted to do everything we could to help them get the legislation passed. And because I'm the same way myself. So they had a big meeting in Nashville at a hotel there on Murfreesboro Road, and it was on a Saturday. The director of the Bureau had been scheduled to be the speaker, keynote speaker, and he had other duties to attend to, and passed it down to the deputy director, and finally they passed it on down to me and said, "Don't pass it any further," because I was at the bottom anyway. So I had to be down there. They removed the invitation for lunch and being the keynote speaker, they moved me to 1 o'clock. So I got down there, and there was a TV station pulling out of the parking lot. And I knew the people because the TV station was close to TBI headquarters. So I kind of turned and looked down where they wouldn't notice who I was going in there. And might have saved my career when I did that. And so I found me a parking spot and went on inside, introduced myself to the people. It was acting as the MC of the program. And I was introduced to very light applause. They weren't really looking to see me. And my instructions when I went down there was to make sure that these people understood they had to be good when they went in front of the legislature, and try to make sure that they didn't get too emotional. I've always been one that uses a lot of analogies when I talk, and I've been guilty of being like one of my other mentors. When we were talking on the other program, my personal mentor was Neil Ensminger. But he was not my mentor in law enforcement, and I tried to keep everything with law enforcement. But anyway, I started talking. Nobody has cell phone back then, but there's a sea of little red dots back through there in the crowd, probably a couple hundred people there from all over the state. And little red dots all back through there taping me. And so all my career, I never used any notes when I talked. And I got that from Neil. So anyway, having said all that, I started using some analogies, and I didn't get any smiles from anybody. It wasn't working, so I thought I'm going to have to go to a little extreme here. So I said, ladies and gentlemen, let me deliver one more analogy about how we might have to do this when we go down to the legislature. We want to help you. I said, just imagine you're traveling, and this huge concrete barrier is all over the road. And if you keep driving, you're going to drive into it, and you're going to kill yourself, and you're going to fail. So you're going to have to figure out what to do. You're either going to have to go around the barrier, climb over it, or tunnel under it. And keep in mind who I'm talking to. It's the State Humane Society, the leaders in the entire state. And when I got that under it, I said, just blurted it out before I knew what I said. I said, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I got the ad out and realized what I'd done. And I knew if I broke down and said, oh, I'm so sorry, I apologize, I chose my words terribly, I knew it wouldn't help because I was getting some glares, buddy. And the only thing I knew to do, I broke into hysterical laughter. And I started clapping my knees and just rolling. Finally, a couple of old fellows up towards the front cackled a little bit. And just a minute to that place, the building came down. It was a wonderful meeting. I was there a long time. We got the legislation through. I reported for work Monday morning. First thing is I got called in the director's office to see how the meeting went. And did you tell them, did you set them straight? Oh, well, I said, yes, sir, everything went really well. We had a great meeting. I got out of there really quickly. That's probably, that was a rough one right there.
Well, that's a great story because humor can diffuse difficult situations. And you've been such an advocate for the Humane Society. I'm sure ever since is maybe as a little bit of compensation for that. But you told that story at Tennessee Wesleyan, and I was watching the crowd, and it was amazing how people, it dawns on people in different speeds, and they got that. So you stayed friends with the cats, you stayed friends with Rick and Dick and Tommy. That's right, correct. For all these people, these stories. Well, Larry, you've always had a great sense of humor, and I think that's a very important thing for any leader to have because it, once again, takes a lot of energy and tensions out of a room or a situation if it's played well, and it's admirable. We so much appreciate you talking to us today and allowing us to laugh with you these situations, and I know we'll be talking about this for a long, long time. Thank you so much, Larry. We've enjoyed it.